Hey guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance. Imagine lying on a beach in Zanzibar, cocktail in hand, completely unpaid on an approved sabbatical, when suddenly a brand new manager you've never met calls you dead weight and fires you over email. He thinks he is cutting costs, but he has no idea that he just killed the company's right to its entire product line. Let's dive right into the story. And the title Reddit Malicious Compliance story starts like this. So I work in outdoor luxury furniture design, not the cheap plastic stuff that you see at garden centers, but the high-end pieces that 5-star resorts use around their pools and beaches. Think about oversized sun loungers, elegant cabanas, sophisticated daybeds, and those impressive pergolas that provide just the right amount of shade while looking absolutely stunning. It is a niche industry, but it's profitable, especially around the Mediterranean, where hotels are willing to pay premium prices for furniture that can withstand the elements while looking beautiful in Instagram photos. I've been in this industry for over a decade, working for a company based in Cyprus. When I started, the company was small, maybe just 15 people total, and they were struggling to differentiate themselves in a crowded market. The original owner was a decent guy who knew the business side, but readily admitted that he had zero creative vision, and that is where I came in. From day one, I was the one sketching designs, building prototypes in the workshop, tweaking dimensions, and testing materials, basically creating the entire product line from scratch. I would spend days in the workshop getting sawdust in my hair and then fly to hotels across Greece, Italy, Spain, and Turkey to personally oversee installations and get feedback from resort managers. Yes, it was exhausting but rewarding, and slowly our designs started getting noticed. Hotels would specifically request our furniture because it looked different, more elegant, and more considered than the competition. Here's the crucial part that everyone seems to have forgotten. Back when the company was small and nobody really cared about intellectual property, I had a lawyer friend help me negotiate my employment contract. I was young, naive in many ways, but my friend was sharp. He insisted that I retain the registered design rights to all physical products I created. The shape, the look, the configuration, all of it would be registered in my name. The company would get an exclusive license to manufacture and sell those designs, but only while I remained employed there. At the time, the owner barely blinked at this clause. The company was tiny, they were just happy to have someone who could actually design furniture that sold, and frankly, I don't think anyone really understood what it meant. However, it was all there in black and white in my contract, probably signed and witnessed, but it just sat in a filing cabinet gathering dust while we all got on with building the business. And build it we did. Over the years, my designs became the company's bestsellers. Our signature lounger, a sleek piece with curved designs and an innovative reclining mechanism, became a staple at resorts and across the Mediterranean. The modular cabana system I designed allowed hotels to configure spaces in dozens of different ways. The daybed collection I created became so popular that cheaper knockoffs started appearing, which actually validated that we were doing something right. The company grew from 15 people to over 60. We opened a larger workshop, hired sales staff, and expanded into new markets. I was traveling constantly, visiting hotels, attending trade shows, managing the design team, and so on. My salary grew accordingly. I was not rich, but I was comfortable, and more importantly, I was proud of what we had built. But here's the thing about creative work that people don't understand. It is draining. Not just physically, though the travel and workshop time certainly took a toll on me, but also mentally and emotionally. Every design project required me to pour myself into it completely. I would wake up at 3 in the morning with ideas, sketch them out, obsess over proportions, agonize over material choices, and then wear the endless revisions based on client feedback, the compromises required to hit price points, and the frustration when manufacturers could not execute my vision properly. After a decade of this, I was completely burned out. I was having trouble sleeping, struggling to come up with new ideas, and generally felt like I was running on fumes. I needed a break. Not a week-long vacation, but a real extended break to decompress and remember why I loved design in the first place. So I approached the owner about taking a sabbatical. I proposed 6 months, unpaid, where I would completely disconnect from the company. No emails, no calls, no meetings, just pure time off. I'd worked hard for a decade and never asked for anything beyond my normal vacation allowance. I thought it was a reasonable request, and the owner, to his credit, understood immediately. He knew I was burned out, and he knew the company's success was largely built on my designs, so he agreed without hesitation. We drew up a formal agreement signed by both him and HR, clearly stating the dates, confirming it was unpaid leave, specifying that I had no work obligations during this period, and guaranteeing my position would be waiting when I returned. I chose Zanzibar, Tanzania as my destination. I'd always been fascinated by the island, and a friend had a connection to a small guest house near the beach that needed someone to house sit for a few months. It was perfect. I packed light, booked my flight, and headed off to Africa for 6 months of swimming, reading, and absolutely no furniture design, and Zanzibar was exactly what I needed. I got a simple room near the beach, spent my mornings swimming in the turquoise water, and my afternoons reading under palm trees, and my evenings watching spectacular sunsets. The pace of life was completely different from Cyprus. Nobody rushed anywhere, and people actually talked to each other instead of staring at phones. It was glorious. The guest house owner, a friendly local woman who had inherited the property from her parents, mentioned that she was thinking about replacing some of the outdoor furniture. I then offered some casual advice, nothing formal, just friendly suggestions about local materials and simple designs that would work in this tropical climate. I helped sketch a few basic pieces, more as a favor than anything else, and a local carpenter built them. It was fun to design something simple and unpretentious with no corporate constraints or profit margins to worry about. This was small-scale stuff, nothing that would compete with the high-end resort furniture I normally worked on. Meanwhile, back in Cyprus, things were changing. The original owner, the guy who had hired me and built the company from nothing, decided to step back from day-to-day operations. He was getting older and wanted to enjoy his success rather than manage every detail. He remained the majority owner but hired someone new to run operations as the managing director. This new guy was, from what I heard through the grapevine, the complete opposite of the original owner. He was younger, maybe early 30s, had some fancy degree from somewhere prestigious, and came from a corporate background. He was all about efficiency metrics, organizational restructuring, and eliminating what he called legacy practices. The old-timers at the company told me that he walked around with a tablet, constantly checking dashboards and spreadsheets, and seemed to view the company purely as numbers on a screen rather than people making furniture. I didn't pay much attention to these updates at first. I was in Zanzibar after all, deliberately disconnected from work drama. I checked my personal email maybe once a week, more out of boredom than genuine interest, but I'd made it clear to everyone that I was not available for work matters. The sabbatical agreement was crystal clear about this, but then about 3 months into my sabbatical, I got an email that made my blood pressure spike. It was from the new managing director, and the tone was immediately very aggressive. He demanded that I start joining weekly video calls to justify my cost to the company and prove my ongoing value. He wrote something about how everyone else was working hard while I was apparently on an extended vacation, and how this was unacceptable in a new company culture. I read the email 3 times sitting in a beach cafe in Zanzibar, completely stunned. First of all, the sabbatical was unpaid. I was not costing the company anything here except the abstract notion that my salary line existed on the org chart at 0. Second, the whole point of a sabbatical was that it was leave, no work obligations. That was the entire agreement. I took a deep breath and decided to respond calmly and professionally. I'm generally not a confrontational person, and I figured this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe HR had not properly briefed him about my situation, so I drafted a polite email explaining that my sabbatical was a pre-approved unpaid leave with no work obligations, and I attached a copy of the signed sabbatical agreement. I highlighted the relevant clauses about it being unpaid and obligation-free and asked him to confirm that he had received the document. I thought that would be the end of it, but how wrong I was. His response came within hours, and it was even more hostile than the first email. He called me entitled and said that I was acting like a partner rather than an employee. He threw in some comments about how the company needed young blood and fresh thinking, rather than so-called old designers who think they are artists. I'm not even that old, by the way, but apparently to him, anyone over 35 is basically ancient. And by the way, guys, just out of curiosity here to interject, let me know how old you are in the comments, because it would be interesting to know. Also, let me know where you are watching from today. Anyway, he also kept insisting that I was draining company resources by taking paid leave, even though I had explicitly shown him the agreement proving it was unpaid. Either he couldn't read or he was deliberately lying. I suspected the latter though. I responded again, even more calmly, simply restating the facts and attaching the agreement again. I kept everything purely factual, dates, clauses and signatures. No emotion, no argument, just documentation. I was starting to build a paper trail, though at the time I was not entirely sure why. It just felt important to have everything in writing. This back and forth continued for a couple weeks, and he would send aggressive emails and I would respond with calm facts and documentation. He started copying other people on the emails, clearly trying to make me look bad, but anyone who actually read the thread could see that I was simply pointing out what the signed agreement said. Through friends still at the company, I heard what was really happening. The new managing director was apparently obsessed with cutting costs and eliminating dead weight, as he charmingly put it. He had been going through the organizational chart looking at salaries and tenure and had identified several long-serving employees he considered overpaid, and I was apparently at the top of his list. In meetings, he had been loudly complaining about me, and according to my sources he would say things like I was too old, overpaid, and a dinosaur designer who thinks he is an artist, and worst of all, getting paid to lie on a beach in Africa. He was actively lying to people, telling them I was costing the company thousands every month while doing nothing, when payroll clearly showed my sabbatical was unpaid. The guy apparently hated that I had any kind of autonomy or special treatment. In his corporate worldview, everyone should be interchangeable and easily replaceable. The idea that a designer might have actual value beyond their immediate productivity drove him crazy, and then came the meeting where everything exploded. The new managing director called a meeting with the owners and senior management. He put together a whole presentation about organizational efficiency and cost optimization. When he then got to my name on the org chart, he launched into a rant. According to people who were there, he insisted that I was deadweight, too old and overpaid, and that he could hire 2 junior designers for what the company was paying me. He kept repeating his lie about me being paid during the sabbatical, until finally someone from HR gently pointed out that no, actually, the sabbatical was unpaid and maybe he should check the records. Instead of backing down when confronted with facts, he doubled down. He said it was the principle of the thing and that no single employee should have that much influence over the product line. He claimed he could easily replace my designs anyway, and that they were not that special, and that any decent designer could do the same work. The original owner, who was still in the meeting, apparently tried to push back. He pointed out that the company's growth had been largely built on my designs, that clients specifically requested my work, and that replacing me was not as simple as the managing director seemed to think. But the new guy was on a mission. He had convinced himself that I was the problem, and he was not gonna let facts get in his way. He pressured the owners, used business school terminology about so-called sunk cost fallacy and organizational restructuring, and ultimately convinced them to let him handle the situation. And handle it he did. Without consulting a lawyer, without reviewing my original employment contract, and without even thinking through the implications, he sent me an email. I was sitting in that same beach cafe in Zanzibar when it came through. The email was cold and blunt. He wrote that due to restructuring and business needs, my employment was terminated effective immediately. My sabbatical was cancelled, I was no longer associated with the company, and HR would process my departure. No severance, no phone call, no nothing, just a smirk little message, essentially saying, "You're gone." I sat there staring at my phone for a long moment, and then I started laughing. I could not help it. The sheer stupidity of what he had just done was almost beautiful in its completeness. You see, he had never read my original employment contract, he didn't know about the design rights clause, and he did not understand that every single product the company was currently selling and every design in their catalog, every piece they had in production, was registered in my personal name. I took a screenshot of his termination email. Then I went back to my room, opened my laptop and pulled up my employment contract. I read through the relevant clauses carefully, just to make absolutely sure I understood them correctly. The language was clear. I retained all registered design rights to products I created. The company had an exclusive license to manufacture and sell those designs only while I remained employed. Upon termination of my employment for any reason, the company's license would end after a short grace period of 30 days. After that, any continued use of my designs would require a separate licensing agreement. It was all there, signed and dated, completely legal and binding. I drafted my response carefully, I thanked him for the written confirmation of my termination, and then I quoted the exact contract clauses about the design rights and the automatic termination of the license. I explained very politely and professionally that as of his termination of my employment, the company's exclusive license to manufacture and sell my registered designs would end in 30 days. After that date, any continued use would require a new licensing agreement. I did not threaten here, I did not get emotional, I simply stated the facts and asked him to confirm the receipt and to ensure the company would act accordingly. I attached copies of the relevant contract pages and the design registration certificates, all of which clearly showed that designs were registered in my name. Then I hit send and went for a swim. His response came faster than I expected actually. He was furious and he wrote some ridiculous nonsense about how "we own everything you made here" and "you don't own anything, we paid you a salary for your work," basically admitting that he had never actually read my contract and had no idea what he was talking about. I sent one final response. I attached the full employment contract, highlighted the relevant sections and included all the registration certificates again, and simply wrote that he should consult the company's legal counsel. I mentioned I would remain open to discussing a commercial licensing agreement as an independent designer in the future, but that I was now, as he had insisted, no longer associated with the company, and then I stopped responding. He sent several more emails, increasingly angry, demanding I get on a video call to discuss this properly. I ignored them all though, I'd said everything that needed to be said and the documentation spoke for itself. I went back to enjoying my time in Zanzibar, but now with a certain anticipation about what would happen next. Back in Cyprus, the 30-day grace period began ticking down and the managing director did absolutely nothing. He apparently convinced himself that it was all a bluff, that I was just bitter about being fired and trying to scare them. He told people I was lying and that the company obviously owned all the designs and that there was no way an employee could retain those rights. Meanwhile, the company had massive commitments in place. They had signed contracts with resort chains for the next season's furniture deliveries, all based on my designs. Their entire marketing materials, their website, their trade show displays, everything showcased my signature pieces. Those designs were not just products, they were the company's entire brand identity. When one of the larger hotel groups asked for proof of design rights as part of the contract due diligence, someone at the company finally sent my original employment contract to their lawyer. I heard about what happened next from multiple sources and apparently it was spectacular. The company's lawyer read the contract, reviewed the design registrations and looked at the email chain between me and the managing director and basically told them that they were completely screwed. The lawyer's opinion, from what I was told, was crystal clear. The designs were registered in my personal name, the company had only ever had a license dependent on my employment, and by terminating me and ignoring my contractual warnings, they had now lost the legal right to continue manufacturing or selling any of those products. Continuing production would be design infringement, which could expose them to legal action not just from me, but could also scare off hotel clients who didn't want to be involved in intellectual property disputes. The lawyer also apparently pointed out that the email trail was devastating for them. The managing director had explicitly stated that I was no longer associated with the company and had completely ignored my clear contractual warnings sent from Zanzibar, and there was no ambiguity here. He had fired me, cancelled my sabbatical and walked right into a legal trap of his own making. The owners panicked, they had deposits from resorts they potentially couldn't legally fulfill. They had a major marketing campaign that might need to be completely pulled, and they had production lines running that were potentially infringing on my design rights. The whole company's structure was suddenly built on sand, the emails and phone calls started coming and suddenly everyone was very polite to me. They said it was all a misunderstanding and that the managing director had been a bit harsh and that they would love for me to come back. They offered my old job back plus a small pay increase if I would just restore the license and let them continue using the designs. Well, I was still in Zanzibar, watching the sunset from my beach chair when these messages started arriving. I took my time responding, days in some cases. When I finally replied, I did exactly what the managing director had originally insisted on. I treated myself as no longer associated with the company. I was not a desperate ex-employee begging for my job back. I was an independent designer who owned valuable intellectual property that someone wanted to license. I hired my lawyer friend to draft a formal licensing proposal. We calculated how much revenue the company had generated from my designs over the years and how much they stood to make in the future and what a fair market rate would be for licensing those rights. The proposal included a substantial lump sum payment for past and current use of the designs, plus ongoing royalty payments for each piece manufactured, with clear terms, renewal clauses, and deadlines. The numbers were not outrageous, but they were not cheap either. Given how much money the company had made from my work over the years, it was actually quite reasonable, but it was definitely a lot more than they had ever paid me in salary. When the managing director saw the proposal, he apparently lost his mind completely. He called me a blackmailer, a greedy old man, and accused me of holding the company hostage and sent several absolutely unhinged emails threatening legal action for extortion. I didn't respond to any of his rants. Instead, my lawyer forwarded his threats to the owners along with a complete email history showing how the managing director had lied about my sabbatical being paid, fired me without cause, and ignored contractual warnings and put the entire product line at risk through his ignorance and ego. The paper trail we had built was perfect. Every email, every document, every warning was there in black and white. It showed exactly what had happened and whose fault it was. The owners called an emergency meeting, and from what I heard, it was brutal. They had finally realized the full extent of the disaster. They could not afford my licensing proposal without seriously impacting their finances. But they also could not just redesign their entire product line overnight. Any rushed redesign by junior staff would look generic and cheap compared to the sophisticated pieces I'd created over a decade. They were trapped, and it was entirely the managing director's fault. To save face with investors and try to stop the bleeding, they fired him. Quietly, without much fanfare, but he was gone, but the damage was already done. Word had gotten out in the industry, hotels were hearing rumors about design right issues and intellectual property disputes, several clients started getting nervous about their orders, and some contracts were getting cancelled. Others were put on hold pending clarification, and the company's reputation took a serious hit. Nobody wants to buy furniture that might be subject to a legal dispute. Meanwhile, though, I was still in Zanzibar and I'd been approached by someone interesting. One of the company's larger European competitors had been trying to recruit me for years. They'd made offers before, but I'd always been loyal to my original company. But now, with everything that had happened, they saw an opportunity. The competitor flew their director of design to Zanzibar to meet me in person. We had lunch at a beachfront restaurant and he made an offer that was honestly hard to believe. They wanted me to join their design team with complete creative freedom. The salary was 5 times what I'd been making in Cyprus, and they would pay me to maintain a home in Cyprus while also having a design studio in their European headquarters. I could travel to places like Zanzibar whenever I wanted, and they would respect my need for creative space and occasional breaks. Most importantly, they understood and respected intellectual property rights, and they had proper licensing agreements with all their designers. Everything was professional and clear, and I didn't even have to think about it very long. I said yes. The original company in Cyprus made one last desperate attempt to get me back. The owner himself called me, apologized profusely for what happened, and basically offered me anything I wanted if I would just return and let them keep using the designs. I felt bad for him, honestly. He had built the company from nothing, and it was not his fault that he had hired an incompetent managing director who destroyed everything. But I also knew the company was damaged beyond easy repair. The reputation hit, the cancelled contracts, the financial strain of trying to redesign products, while also dealing with the fallout from firing their managing director. It was all too much. I politely declined. I told him I appreciated the apology, but I'd moved on. I wished him well and ended the call. Over the next few months, I heard updates from former colleagues still in Cyprus. The company tried to redesign their product line, but the new designs lacked the sophistication and distinctive style that had made them successful. They looked generic, like cheaper knockoffs of their own former products, and the resort clients who had been loyal for years started switching to competitors. And yes, some of them switched to my new employer, specifically requesting my designs. It was professional and above board, and I was designing new pieces, not just reproducing my old work, but clients recognized my style and aesthetic. The Cyprus company's revenue dropped significantly, and they had to lay off staff, close their expanded workshop, and scale back operations. They didn't go completely bankrupt, but they were reduced to a shadow of what they had been. The original owner eventually sold his stake and retired, disappointed with how everything had turned out. The managing director who had caused all of this, well, I heard he struggled to find another job. Word gets around in industries and nobody wants to hire someone who nearly destroyed a profitable company through sheer arrogance and incompetence. As for me, I'm writing this from Zanzibar again. My new employer understood when I said I needed to come back here for a few months as part of my creative process. They are paying me my full salary, respecting my need for space and trusting my process. I've designed 3 new collections for them already, and all of them are performing exceptionally well. I wake up when I want, swim in the ocean, sketch ideas under palm trees, and video call with the production team when needed. I'm earning 5 times my old salary, and I'm happier than I've been in years, and I'm creating some of my best work. The moral of this whole absurd story: don't fire the person who owns the intellectual property rights to your entire product line. Especially don't do it while they're on a beach in Zanzibar with nothing but time to carefully read contracts and build paper trails. And definitely don't do it just because you think they are too old or overpaid without actually understanding what they contribute to the company. And the next one is a fantastic revenge story that you don't want to miss. It is titled "Framed and Fired While the Boss Was Away." So I took him down with me. Years ago, I worked at, let's just say, Mexican Subway. I was in high school and really enjoyed working there with some of my friends. One girl I had known since 3rd grade. We had a kitchen manager we were called Judd. Judd was an absolute creepshow of a 27-year-old guy. He drove a loud car, thought shouting in your face made him cool, and bragged often about his 2 girlfriends, 118 and 135. This wasn't all to know about Judd. One day after work, my friend and another girl from work were complaining about Judd. I listened in horror as I found out about Judd's other hobby: frequent attempted assault of the girls at work. From gropes and rubs to inappropriate questions, he did it all. The worst move he pulled was following a girl into the walk-in fridge, turning on the light and blocking the door while suggesting they engage in physical acts. I felt sick. I had no idea this was going on, and I knew he was deplorable and gross, but not that bad. Now, for a quick aside, I've never been a particularly fit gentleman, and I never liked to let people know too much about myself if I didn't like them, so Judd didn't know that I was a purple belt and assistant instructor in a weird hybrid martial arts class a friend taught that he said was a mix of jiu-jitsu and Hawaiian bone crushing. No idea how real the second one is, but needless to say, I was not too keen to sit back and let Judd keep creeping. One day I saw one of my friends going into the fridge, and right behind her was Judd. I dropped what I was doing and went to the fridge. Inside, my friend had her back to the wall as Judd stood by the door, lights on this time. I told my friend to leave the fridge, which she did in a hurry. Just me and Judd now. I walked up and got right in his face. He began to explain what I'd walked in on. I cut him off. "If I ever hear you saying disgusting crap to a girl ever again, I will beat the F out of you." He again started to talk, got mad face, but I shouted, "Do you understand me, Judd? I hear anything at all about you again and I will hurt you. Then I'll report you to the police. Trust me." Then I left and turned the lights off on the way out. A few days later, I get a call on my day off, a coworker asking where I am. It turns out Judd changed the schedule the night before and forgot to tell me. The next day it happened again. My 1 p.m. shift suddenly was opening and I was late again. This happened a 3rd time and I was fired by a visiting regional manager while our GM was gone on a TV show. It was obvious what happened and I was not gonna take it lying down. Now, this was the mid-2000s and online ordering was literally brand new. That meant websites were not very secure. And I knew both the busiest times of the day and the items we ran out of the most that took forever to remake. Every day for a week after I was fired, I would go to their website on my grandma's computer, make a fake name or 3, and order hundreds of dollars of very complicated burritos, everything with extra sour cream and guacamole, goopy messes that suck to roll, hard tacos, which we only made 4 to 5 sets of per shift, with double meat. All for 5-minute pickup windows at peak lunchtime hours or dinner rush times, whenever Judd was working. In that week I ordered well over $1,500 to $2,000 worth of food that never got paid for and had to be thrown away. By that time I had no friends still working there, so I felt zero remorse for the chaos. I found out from a coworker that 2 weeks after I was let go, Judd was fired. Turns out being the manager when thousands of dollars are thrown away and wait times for food ballooned far past the accepted limit is enough to finally fire the guy everyone hated. I never told my friend what happened in the fridge and I wouldn't do it any differently if I could. Also, my cousin may or may not have used his tire shop tools to remove Judd's valve stamps one particular dark evening. Hard to get to your girlfriend's house when you cannot air up your tire. And before we end the video, let's read another petty revenge story. This one is titled, I put a fake note on a Corvette's windshield that read, "Sorry I hit your car, you probably won't even notice the damage," because it was taking up 4 spots. So the title is fairly self-explanatory, but I will elaborate for you. I was trying to find a parking spot at my university. The lot was notoriously crowded, but my campus didn't have a lot of options. While searching, I saw a Corvette taking up 4 prime spots near the front of the lot. After about 10 minutes of waiting/looking for a spot, one opened up towards the back of the lot. Furious at the nerve of the driver being so inconsiderate, I wrote a note saying, "Sorry I hit your car, you probably won't even notice the damage," and left it on their windshield. When I got out of class and was headed back to my car, I saw a very stereotypical college-aged Corvette owner frantically searching their vehicle while yelling into their phone. I don't know who they were talking to, but I feel bad for them having to deal with this person. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching, I will see you again tomorrow. And please check out my playlist on the left if you cannot get enough of my content.